Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. PJ Glassey is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out his recent appearance on episode 819 of Boundless Body Radio. PJ Glassey has education and certifications, including a bachelor's in exercise science, and is a certified strength and conditioning specialist. PJ started personal training in 1987 and grew his business successfully in the following 11 years. With these clients' help as test subjects, PJ invented his multi-protocol concept and refined it, through 1998, where he founded the X Gym. PJ has been a guest expert on TV, hosted his own show on popular radio stations, has hosted his own podcast, and has authored many works, including national media articles and several books on health and fitness. He is the co-author of What You Need to Know About Muscle Building, 10 Top Trainers Q&A Sessions, and is the author of his own book, Cracking the Calorie Code, a brain dump of most of what PJ has learned over the years through the research he has done in the fields of exercise, nutrition, and brain science. He has created a brain type test for people to discover their unique brain wiring and find results and better motivation, helping them in their health and fitness journey. PJ Glassey, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Hey, it's great to be back. I had such a blast last time. I'm really looking
Uh-oh.
forward to it this time too.
So did I, man. One of the cool parts about podcasting is it allows you to have great conversations with people. Something magic happens when you push the record button and you get to capture something and share it out with the world. And I've gotten to meet so many people around the world, and you're just like a perfect example of somebody that I don't know that our paths would have ever crossed. But talking to you, chatting with you, I learned so much on our last episode. I feel like we're good friends that go back a really, really long time. And it's one of my favorite parts about podcasting is getting to meet people like you just doing amazing work out there. So really grateful for you. And I'm so glad that you booked this session to do another chat today, so soon after our last one.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun and we just really didn't get to everything. So it's good to be back.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Re-listening to the episode that we just created was fascinating. I've started to implement some of the things that we were talking about, not as systematically as you do. I really love the way you have a structure and a system that you stick to. But even just kind of the mechanics of different lifts, of like the pauses, being more mindful about doing holds and pulses, which I've done some in the past, but try to do more of it. And I can tell you, my body is a little bit more sore than usual from doing some of these lifts. So I'm very grateful that we found a way to make these shorter workouts be infrequent, and still be effective with some of the techniques you've come up with. So I have to just thank you for that. It's definitely changed my workouts and helped me mix things up a little bit. And I'm a little sore, got to tell you.
That is so great to hear. Thanks.
Absolutely. I do have some cleanup questions I wanted to ask you from the last episode that we did. We talked a little bit about exercise selection, and how you choose what exercises go where. And I was hoping we could go into a little bit more detail about that. And starting with maybe explaining the difference between a compound lift, and a non-compound lift, and how you think about them structure-wise inside of a workout.
Mm-hmm. We don't do things the traditional way, but we have some similarities with traditional training. And the biggest similarity is that we start with the biggest muscles and go down to the smallest muscles. So we don't want to work the triceps before we work a chest press, because the triceps are used in that chain of the chest press. And if we do the triceps first, then that's going to be the weak link in the chain, and that'll be the limiting factor instead of the chest. So we will do it that way because it makes a lot of sense to do the order that way. And compound, of course, is just lots of muscles instead of isolation, which would be the opposite of compound. But our main thing is compound, as much compound as we can, starting with the big muscles and working down to the small muscles. And it's really about the chain of muscles that you're working. So for instance, we will do this exercise, we call it leg curl sliders, where you're lying down on the floor on your back with your heels under carpet sliders. Then you push your hips up into the air like a wrestler bridge. So your shoulder blades and your head are still touching, but everything else is in the air. And your heels, of course, are touching on the sliders. And then now you're shuffling back and forth, right, left, with your feet on the floor if you're doing interval training, or we can do it with any of our methods. So like the the motion method that we talked about last time, 7 seconds out, 7 seconds in. So then, for instance, with that method, on the way out, you're going to take 7 seconds to slide your feet out. So your legs are getting straighter as you're sliding your feet out away from your body, but keeping the feet and knees pretty close together, and the hips as high as you can. Now, when the feet slide out, the hips come down a little bit naturally, and there's nothing you can do about that, but you're still always focusing on trying to keep the hips up as much as you can, and then sliding back in with your feet, which is the hard phase of this exercise, and still trying to keep your hips up. So they might rise up a little bit as the feet come in. And doing it that way, you are training your hamstrings primarily, but you're also getting low back. So people always feel it in the hamstrings first. Second, they feel it in the low back because you're doing that wrestler bridge. And so the back has to work really hard to keep your hips up in the air, which is great because it's a functional, safe way to do to exercise the low back, because you're not doing a deadlift or anything with spinal compression. It's more like isometric than anything. And you're also getting glutes, although they're such a big, strong muscle, it's hard to feel them in this exercise. So they're not going to really ever fatigue or burn. The weak link is probably going to be the hamstrings, which will fail first, but that's kind of the purpose of the exercise. So that's good. It's appropriate in this case. You're also getting calves because the gastroc crosses the knee joint. So it's also a knee flexor. And so it's a chain of muscles, calves, hamstrings, glutes, low back, basically the whole posterior chain that you're training together. It's called a hamstring exercise, but you're also getting those other muscles. Now, the other muscles in the chain probably aren't going to go to failure like the hamstrings will, but they're still getting benefit, mostly because of the endurance they're getting out of it, because of the time under tension, because there's never any rest for 3 minutes, but also the communication between the muscles. So what you're doing when you're doing with this controlled motion and chain of muscles talking to each other, they have to communicate and cooperate. When they do that, their communication improves, they get along better, and coordination improves. So anytime you're working a chain of muscle, you're also working the nervous system in that chain, where isolation, you don't get that. So if I were to sit down on a hamstring machine that it's got the axle goes through my knee joint. I'm sitting there and I'm doing the leg curls. Well, it's great isolation, and the bodybuilder would want to do that. But if you want functional training, it's a horrible idea because you're not getting good communication with the joints, the proprioceptors in the joints, with the nerves between the muscles. On that seated leg curl, you're only getting hamstrings and calves, but they don't really have to talk to each other because it's guided by that stupid axle that you lined up going through your knee joint, and the machine's doing a lot of the motion for you. So there's no coordination benefit to this. But if you do it like I described with that functional chain that has to coordinate the movement between all these different muscles at the same time that are all talking to each other, now your coordination is improving, and that's the basis of functional training.
Got it. That's a great answer. I think about it in the same way as you described. Like, let's take care of all the central muscles first. That's where the biggest muscles are. You wouldn't want to tire out, like you said, like your tricep before you did a chest press, because that would be now your rate limiter, and now your chest couldn't experience what you needed it to. So that makes a lot of sense as far as program design. And my wife works here out of our home, and she does tissue release for people, and we're very choosy about what we put in our space. But on the walls are all 7 of, I believe it's Thomas Meyer's anatomy trains, to show people like how all of the muscles are connected to each other, how they talk to each other. And you mentioned those, the chains of muscles, and explaining to somebody like, yes, you have shoulder pain, but that doesn't necessarily mean the pain is coming from the shoulder. It could be coming from the opposite hip, could be coming from another place. And this is how all of this is tied together. So I love how you think about it in that way. That it's not just one muscle in isolation. Like we talked about last time, that might be fine for a bodybuilder who wants to build bulk in that particular area. You want to be thinking of everything kind of globally and attached everywhere, because that's the way our bodies think about it.
Bingo. And you want them talking to each other, communication. And the more they talk to each other in a controlled way, the better they get along, the more they learn they need to cooperate with each other. And then when you have good functional strength after training like that, when you go down and you pick up that box off the floor wrong, you don't throw your back out because that chain has already talked with each other. They know how to coordinate and get along and complement each other. And so they do a kind of you do a weird motion and the chain says, oh boy, he forgot perfect form again, but we know how to compensate for this and override the back going out.
Yeah, well explained. I like that. And I think you kind of already explained this. And I think I know how you're going to answer this question. I'm going to ask it anyway. Core specific training. How do you think about core specific training, like the muscles that are directly in the middle part of our body?
Yeah. Most people think about it as abs, doing abs, but I think about it as a belt that goes all the way around. So in the example of that leg curl, that's a core exercise because you're getting that low back and you're suspending yourself in the air with your hips, and the core is a bridge in that case, and those muscles are really working. And so they're part of that whole chain and communication. So the back is part of the core. Your sides are part of the core. So like the easiest example would be a side plank. That's core. And then of course the abs are too. And there are other things that stability wise, like deeper muscles, like the transverse abdominis, when you're sucking your belly button in, that's core. The obliques, that's core. Heck, I would even consider the psoas as core, even though it's super deep. It's a hip flexor, but it acts on the core. So anything that controls motion between the pelvis and your rib cage is core. Front, back, side, all of that is core. And the reason core is so important is because a strong core will transfer energy efficiently from your lower body to your upper body. So even for a runner, like a marathon runner, the core is vital because if they have a weak core, then they're not going to be able to transfer energy between their upper body and lower body because the core isn't a good link of that energy transfer if it's weak. So then the upper body effort that they're using is going to go down to the core and just disappear basically into the air, and it doesn't get to go down to the legs and vice versa. So you have to have that strong core for really good transfer of energy as well when you're talking about functional training.
Yeah, got it. Okay. That's again along the lines of how I thought you would answer that question. It sounds like a lot of that is baked into the exercises that people are already doing. Like you said, you described a hamstring dominant exercise, but you're still using so many other parts of the body. Just so it's not the hamstring in isolation. It's all the other things, including those muscles that we would consider like in the core. I really appreciate that. One thing that stood out from our original conversation, and when we kind of realized like we probably should do a second one to go a little bit deeper into this, is when you said that part of your program design and the reason why you're changing things up and you've got different ways of doing things every 7 weeks is because the brain has to be very engaged with what you're doing. And so much of your background is in psychology. That's where a lot of your research originated, as I understood it, and also your own personal history. You had mentioned your mom last time, but these things are not kind of in isolation. Like it's not like you have health and fitness and then you also have like brain health over here. All of it's like very integrated. So I just maybe we could hear your history a little bit about being interested in psychology, kind of the things you knew or didn't know about when your mom got ill. And yeah, so how some of that journey has gone for you.
Yeah, well, I started at SPU as a psych major, so took a lot of classes and learned a lot of things, but I was also passionate about fitness. And so I got to my senior year, beginning my senior year, and I thought, well, I could probably make a lot more money as a psychologist, which is what I wanted to do, be a psychologist. But do I really want to sit around and listen to people's problems all day? And I was also with all the classes and everything training I was taking, I was skeptical of that it would actually be helpful. I know that sounds crazy, but my gut instinct was, yeah, I don't want to sit around and listen to people's problems all day. B, I don't think it's good for them to encourage them to keep talking about their problems over and over. And now there's a book out. The name escapes me, but it's a woman. She's brilliant. She was on Joe Rogan, and she wrote a book actually about raising kids. But she's a psychologist that claims this. She comes and says this all the time, that when you talk about your problems, it's called rumination, and it can actually make them worse and expand your problems, and then put you in this state where you cause more of those problems. And so, yes, it's helpful. People have to get it out, right? Especially if they're stuffing it. So I would talk about it once could be great just to get it out. And so the counselor knows about it, but ruminating on it for most people, I think is really, and so I was like, I don't even know if I agree with this. So then I wanted to switch over to my other passion, which is exercise science, and help people get healthy and fit. But then I was really excited about using the psychology to do that with people, because it is a lot, as you know, it's a ton of psychology to train somebody properly. And so I made that decision. I switched over, which, kept me there an extra year, but that was okay because my dad was a professor and I got 95% off tuition. So it was no
Nice.
big deal to
Nice.
stay another year. The only regret I have is that I didn't stay and get my master's, but I was just so itching to get out, after 5 years, that I just didn't. But someday I may go back. But since then, I've had my own master's and PhD really, and just studying it since then, just voraciously, especially starting in the year 1998, when my sister and I knew that mom's memory was an issue. And then she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's in the year 2000. And I was already had dove into the research more than I was already doing, and learned a ton. Now, back then, we didn't know enough to help people with Alzheimer's. And so she passed in 2005, but I never stopped. I never got out of that rabbit hole. I just stayed in the whole time because the science was changing so fast. And I knew that we were going to discover that it was changeable. And I needed to be in that research to find out how, because I wanted to be one of the first people to know so I could tell other people how to do that. And so that first came out that you could slow it down. That was really exciting. So then I started helping a lot of people slow it down. And then it came out, well, it looks like we can actually stop it. Unless it's the last stage, we can stop the progression. That was really exciting. And so then I was telling everybody about that. And then it came out that, hey, we can reverse this. We can actually turn it around. And that's more dependent on the person that has it than anything else. But if you can get them to actually do the things. And so that was super exciting. And then I have a post that on my personal website about the top 5 things you can do to prevent and even reverse all forms of dementia. And I can tell you where that link is if you want to connect it. But
That would be
that's
great.
helped a bunch of people. And so, anyways, along that journey, I discovered that there's lots of different brain types. And so when I was helping people with fitness and nutrition and dementia, some things would make sense to some people, and others it wouldn't make sense at all. I was also developing brain training techniques to help people past struggles and roadblocks and speed bumps in their journey. But these techniques wouldn't apply and be effective for everybody. For some people, it would be great. And for other people, it wouldn't work at all. And so I was just basically throwing spaghetti up against the wall and seeing what stuck. But I also knew that people's brains were different. And so I said, well, I got to figure this out. How can I determine what their brain is like? And so then I dove into that one and came up with, some years later, came up with my brain type test, thanks to a whole bunch of people that were willing to take it and retake it and A/B testing and all this kind of stuff. And now there's 16 different brain types, and each brain type has their own specific brain wiring. And so I could divide out the 30 brain training techniques that I came up with based on a type. And so then once I determined their type from the test, I would give them their half dozen brain training techniques that were probably going to work for that person. Still, there's variation between people, even if they have the same type, of which ones work better or not. But at least I've pared it down for them. So now it's not throwing spaghetti up against the wall anymore. It's, hey, these are going to work for you. Now let's learn and do, because they're skills that get more effective with practice as the skill is built. Let's find the ones that are your superpowers, and those are going to help you with whatever you're struggling with. Maybe it's emotional eating, maybe it's overeating, maybe it's exercise motivation, maybe it's staying on track with your goals, maybe it's preventing burnout, whatever it is. Here's your superpower brain training techniques to literally rewire your brain to become the person you want to be, who will succeed at what you're trying to do. Because it's almost like we have to form a new identity in order to keep on going with our goals. Because, okay, I'm holding my hands up. This is for the people that are listening but can't see the video here. So I'm holding the hands, they're level with each other. They're even with each other. Now, if I'm going to get results, let's say that my exercise program and my nutrition program is working. Okay. So here's this hand right here is my body improvement. So I'm going to improve like this. Great. This is my brain over here. Okay. So my body is changing, but my brain isn't. So the brain stays here on this level. Now, what happens later? So I get my results, I'm really happy, or I get further away from the pain that got me started, whatever got me started and motivated in the program. I'm further away from that now, and I'm going to slack off. Now, imagine there's a rubber band between my two hands. This one's high, this one's low. The brain is low. The results from my program is high. Boom, snaps me back down. This is the diet yo-yo. The reason that people yo-yo is because their brains don't change. But if they have brain training techniques, then as their body changes, their brain is changing. So here's that rubber band. It's going straight across there. There's no stretch. So now when they reach their results, they can stay there because they think differently, because their brain has changed along with their body, and the brain isn't still down here, snapping them back down with that tight rubber band.
That's really interesting and very well explained. And that same person would probably think that it's their own willpower, like they're running out of willpower every February. They don't know what happens. They were so motivated last January. They get to February, they think they just suddenly ran out of willpower, when really that kind of effect is happening, and they end up, gaining all the way back and then some, and moving away from their fitness goals. So that was absolutely fascinating. So the podcast that you were hosting for a while, I believe it's been a while since you put out an episode, but it's still available. I'm really glad it's still available. And I've crushed a few of the episodes. My favorite one is where you took the two people through the actual test itself. It reminded me, like listening to you administer the test, it reminded me a little bit of doing, I believe it was the Strengths Finder test, where you ask a question and there's an A and a B answer. And I had a tough time with some of the questions because I could relate to one and I could relate to the other. And the Strengths Finder test is kind of the same, where it's like it gives you one and gives you another. And it's like both may be a little bit true, but you use your best intuition to take a guess. So the test comprises of 20 different questions where you say, I'm like this or I'm like this, essentially. Is that correct?
Exactly. And most of the questions are easy to answer. Some of them are really hard because you're like, oh man, I don't know. And you're tempted to go ask somebody else, but nope, don't do that. Answer them all yourself. Don't get any input from anyone else, and just go with your gut. And just say, well, my initial response was this. Now I'm just second guessing myself. Well, it's probably your initial response is the correct answer.
Good. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so you're going through these 20 questions. It seemed to me, like I listened to my podcast a little bit fast anyway, so it could have been that. But it sounded like you were going through the questions fairly quickly. Is that deliberate? Do you do that so people are relying on their instantaneous, like the first thing that comes to mind in their intuition, or was that just maybe I was listening to the podcast fast, or is that part of the test as well?
Oh, well, people need to do their own speed, but I do recommend that people go through it because if you stop and second guess yourself, it can take forever. But if you're doing it at the right speed, it'll take 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. It seemed
So
pretty quick.
it's pretty fast. Yeah.
Got it. And then tell us a little bit about the information that you get afterwards. The two people that you were doing the assessment on, they had some attributes that they shared, and they also have ones that were that were
hmm
different. And I believe you said most people will have at least one category, and a majority will have two as well. Can you explain
hmm
both of those?
Yeah. So most people have two brain types. They have a primary and a secondary. The primary is usually how they are at home, and the secondary is their adaptive brain wiring, how they usually are at work. So most people are different. That's why most people have two types. But then there's some people, like my wife, who just has one type. And she's so emphatic on her answers, and the way that she answered brings back just one type. So the result is, yeah, you're not different. You're the same at home as you are at work. And she works from home a lot too. And I would concur. When I hear her talking to other people and meeting with other people at work, that's the Bev I know. There's no difference. But the rest of us um, have to have, often have to have an adaptive brain type. And it's not a bad thing to be one or just one or two. Most people are two. I'm two because I'm naturally an introvert, but because of my work, I have to do a really good impersonation of an extrovert all day. And so I have, yeah, you too. And so
Definitely.
I have I have an adapted brain type. And so I have the two. They're actually kind of similar, but my secondary is more extroverted. Now, in about 5% of the cases, people will get their two types back and they will see, oh, my secondary seems to resonate with me a lot more than my primary. And it could be that they were at work when they took the test. And so they're just thinking about themselves that way. Or it could be that they feel like more themselves, their work self feels like more of them than their home self. But in in either case, they're going to get two types. So in each type, you get half a dozen, six brain training techniques to help you need less willpower is the main thing. So remember with the hand demonstration here, one hand high, one hand low, the tension in that rubber band as the hands spread apart, that's willpower. That's the amount of willpower that you need. When you're changing your brain and your body at the same time, you're rewiring your brain, no willpower is needed because there's no tension in the rubber band. And that's what these techniques are about. It's about hacking your brain so you don't need the willpower because you are the person, because you're changing your brain into the person you want to be, and that person doesn't need willpower. So when you and I do our daily eating and when you and I do our daily training, it's just what we do. It's like brushing our teeth. We don't have to force ourselves to do that, to eat right and to exercise because it's who we are. And that's the purpose of the brain type test is to help people rewire their brains into becoming a different person. It doesn't change their personality, but it changes their habits. It helps them stop old habits that are sabotaging them and helps them start new habits with tons of less effort than before and less willpower because they're rewiring their brain into becoming that person they want to be. So then when they get to their goals, they're eating like you and me without having it be an effort.
Yeah. That's brilliant. That's very well described. And yeah, I just have to say, like, dude, I'm the guy that will go to the low carbohydrate conferences, be there all day, give
Mhm.
everybody hugs, talk to everybody, and then Irish goodbye. And so, like, 5 minutes before the thing ends, and walk, 3 miles to my hotel the long way. Like, I got to get out of there. Got to have some alone time.
Yes.
So I can relate for sure. Um,
Yeah.
so maybe it would be helpful. We don't have to go through all of them. Maybe one or two of the different brain types. Could you maybe highlight, one or two of them, and like what might be an example of one of those techniques that they could be doing. I found this part again very interesting about that the podcast episode you did with the two others where you were describing like, oh, this is what it says you are, and especially with the first one, they were like, oh my gosh, it explains so much, and that, like, this is why this technique will help you, but this other technique will be better for her. Yeah, can you just give us a few examples of that?
Totally. So let me do a screen share here. Let me go back to, because it'll be a lot easier for the people that can see.
As always, we'll link to YouTube as well. We'll try to
Yeah.
describe as best we can, but yeah, this will be helpful to see. I can tell you already.
All right. So I'm sure you can see this. And this is my brain type. So this is my primary brain type. It's called the scientist. So here we are on page 1. It talks about mental toughness, good mental, physical toughness, because that usually translates mental to physical. A good imagination. That got me in trouble a lot in school because I was always daydreaming, and my mom had to put me on a note system where she would send me with notes from the teacher, and the teacher would give me a daily score based on how well I paid attention
Oh my
and
goodness.
and how least amount of time when I was paying attention. I was constantly interrupting the teacher, asking to do deep dives on everything she said. Anyways, so then intensity. So I can focus really well. I'm awful at multitasking, but that's okay because my superpower is focus, intensity. Curiosity down here, that's what got me in trouble so much. And then it also shows people here that also have this brain type and the superpowers with these different sections for curiosity, like Marie Curie for curiosity. Anyways, then page 2. This is the shortcuts and tips. So I think outside the box, my best workout is more more of an introverted kind of a thing, but also nice intensity. Scientific goal setting. I like goals. I like to be very scientific about it. This right here is the fire hose. So if I were to click on that, it would come to the raw information, which most people don't want to know because there's way too much information. But for people like me, I totally want to know all the details,
Mm.
more than just this report. I want to know way more details. And so I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to take the deep dive and just get overloaded with a whole bunch of information that was what created this summary. But the summary is what 98% of the people want. And now this is the magical page. This is the brain training page. So these are the brain training techniques. These are going to be the 6 best techniques for my brain type. This is the Ho'opono brain training technique. It's a Hawaiian thing. And this is the trigger technique where I can use triggers to remind myself to do things, but also to motivate myself to do things. This is the EFT technique, which most brain types have on this page because it is the most powerful technique among the most brain types. And this is the tapping technique. You probably know about it. And then what if? So this is for curious people. They can create a scenario where they can say, okay, this is probably going to happen, but what if this happened? And then they can go down that road and set up their brain to do that more automatically. Visualization is going to be very powerful for me, which I know, of course, I know all these because I'm it, and I've used them all. So when I used my spreadsheet to come back to it, it was kind of spooky, even for myself, even though I developed it, how it came
Wow.
out. And then the conscious eating, which is probably the most powerful eating technique for me. I don't need it anymore, but when I was trying to do portion control, training myself on portion control, this was the secret weapon. This was the thing that did it. And you probably know what it is. I mean, it's a lot of these people already know what they are, but for instance, conscious eating, a lot of people are probably familiar with. It's where you're eating mindfully. So you sit down for your meal and you appreciate, all the colors on your plate, how it looks, how it smells. And then when you start eating, you take a bite, you put your fork down, you cross your arms, you lean back, and you just chew it and you enjoy it. And you think about the taste, the texture, the smell, what you like about it, what you might want to change next time you prepare it. And it takes you a long time to do that with each bite. So it's chewed up into mush like it should be, like our food should be. You're taking your time eating it. It's going to take you longer to eat a meal, kind of like the Europeans, but that's one of the reasons that they're not obese like we are. And so these techniques, these 6 techniques are going to be my superpowers, and they're going to help me rewire my brain to get past the struggles of nutrition, but also this page will help with motivation for exercise. And this previous page here, it tells me my best workout. It tells me what I should do. It talks about the strengths that I already have. Like you mentioned Strength Finders earlier, and Strength Finders, the book Strength Finders tells people, hey, instead of focusing all your energy on solving your weaknesses, go with the superpowers you already have. You
Yeah.
have those for a reason. You're wired that way for a reason, and that's your contribution to the world. So first, just focus on those. You can talk about and think about your weaknesses later, but for now, let's just figure out what you do best, because that's how you should be. That's who you should be. And that's kind of what this is. So it points out what your strengths are and tells you how to roll with those as well.
I always really enjoyed that concept of strengths finders when I first did the test of playing to your strengths. Did you yourself design the report?
Yes.
So again, if you're listening and not watching, I recommend that you watch this. But this is probably one of the best visually put together reports of anything I've ever seen. You did a tremendous job with this. The colors are nice. You described like
Oh, thanks.
the people that give the examples, like those are next to it. Like this is really, really, really well done as far as the reporting goes. So you've definitely created a lot of value for people, and it would be so nice to know what some of those things are. So like you said, you're building habits that then become automatic. You don't have to be thinking about them all the time. It's almost
Yep.
like eliminating the willpower, the decision fatigue to do different things. And so yeah, what a tremendous tool. I really
Yeah.
really like this. And yeah, what
Oh,
do you have any like examples that stand out of hurdles that you were able to overcome either yourself or with a client that really stood out where this tool really helped a lot?
oh yeah, lots. And also I wanted to mention on this PDF that people get, these are buttons. So with each brain training techniques, there's a button to click, and then it takes you to either a post or a video to show how to do that technique.
Wow.
And
Well
then
done.
as people do that, they get better at it because it's a skill. And remember, you're rewiring your brain with these techniques. And so it doesn't happen overnight. It happens a lot faster than not having these shortcuts and hacks, but it still takes some commitment. And so to stick with it, with that process, and then become that person. And then the last page here is um, just what now? So it's not like a Myers-Briggs where it just tells you your personality and then you think, oh, that's really cool. And then that was super fun. And then you walk away and kind of forget about it. This is a workbook. This is something that you stick with, and the last page helps with that. It's not just information. This is a course. This is
Yeah,
your own personalized brain course.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. And this is does this cost? Is this free?
Oh no, it costs. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I put years into this.
I
So,
can tell.
and and the reason that I simplified it into this PDF was because I was giving everybody the fire hose before, and it was so overwhelming. Nobody was doing it. They're like, oh yeah, it was great. Oh, but I don't know. Because they're so overwhelmed when they see all the information. And that's why I tell people to be careful before you click that fire hose because you're probably gonna get overwhelmed. Anyways, so it's boiled down into what is actionable and the easy way for them to do it. And I think I'm not answering your questions,
No, that's great.
but
No,
that's it.
one of the things you just said perfectly highlighted the point of the question, which is what's like a scenario where this really helps somebody.
Mhm.
You pointed this out in the podcast episode as well. You were giving everybody the fire hose
Yeah.
because you want the fire hose, and that works for
Yes.
you. So of course
Yes.
I want to do that for everybody else. That's a perfect example of what we're talking about here. Like, oh, I think
Yes.
that carnivore is the most amazing diet. Everybody should do carnivore. No, that's not
Yep.
true. It works okay for
Nope.
me. It doesn't
Hmm.
work for everybody, and I shouldn't go around recommending everybody do it.
Yes, exactly. And that's the trap that most trainers fall into. They find what works themselves. They look and feel great. They got them in shape. They got them to their goals. And now they think everybody should do like they did.
Yeah.
And so they counsel everybody to do like they did. And 20% of the people are probably going to have success with what that trainer told them to do. 80% are going to be frustrated. They're either going to need massive amounts of willpower or they're just going to come back to that trainer and say, heck, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just can't do what you told me to do. And then the trainer usually responds with, well, just have more willpower. Come on, suck it up and do it. But the problem is they don't have the same brain type. They don't know their client has a different brain type. They don't know what works for them, doesn't even make sense to their client. And so this is the shortcut to help those people.
Amazing.
But as long as people do this page down here, I mean, all the pages are helpful, but as long as they're doing this brain training page down here, they're going to change. Their brain is going to change with their body. Tons of examples of people that have done that successfully. And the ones that haven't is for two reasons. Either they just are too busy or they didn't want it hard enough. That's a thing too. Or their subconscious sabotage them because the subconscious operates at about the level of a 3-year-old. Our subconscious is in charge of us, and we can't change that. We can't change either of those two things I just said. However, our prefrontal cortex, I call it the parent brain, can retrain our toddler brain, our subconscious brain. I've named mine, I call him Timmy. And when he's sabotaging me, because toddlers don't like change, they like the status quo. And so the toddler will try to sabotage your efforts, especially on this page, because when you're doing these exercises, you're literally changing your brain. You're rewiring it. The toddler doesn't like that. Timmy doesn't want change. Timmy likes the way he is. He's going to throw his tantrum and he's going to fight it tooth and nail unless I know he's going to do that and I can use my PFC to train him properly, understand him, be friends with him because he's there to stay. Timmy's in charge of me. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
So I can either be mad about that or I can learn how to train Timmy. And this is how to train him, but also know that he's going to push back.
Wow. Well, it's certainly very well designed, and again, aesthetically, it looks amazing. There's so many different tools on there. So thank you so very much for sharing that.
Of
You have done
course.
a tremendous job creating a huge amount of value as far as that goes. There's one more piece of content that I want to talk about. You released another kind of visual aid recently in a post that you made, which I thought was fascinating. And to set this up, I want to share a story from another past guest who is he's a carnivore. He's a rock climber, professional rock climber in Scotland, and does even like free solo type climbing, like
Mm-hmm.
climbing rocks with no ropes. And he was doing one particular climb and would find that he would get to the crux of the climb and couldn't get past that point and would kind of get freaked out and come back down. And that kept happening. And he couldn't figure out what was going on. And he realized that he was getting to that point. He was getting a little bit freaked out, and his heart rate would rise. And one day it just occurred to him, like, just stop at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do anything else, but just hang out here for a second. take another breath, then see, is there one more little move I can make? And is there one more little move? Get into this area where you're outside of your comfort zone. You don't have to like plow through it, but at least get there, stay there, understand, is this a true boundary or can I hang out here for a second? And so I think that's hopefully an okay segue to what this diagram kind of shows as far as our comfort zones.
Absolutely. Yes. So let me share again. Can you see it now?
Yep, definitely can.
Okay. And can you also see my mouse moving around here?
Barely. We're recording
Okay,
on my
right.
phone, so
Okay.
I can hardly see anything, but
Sure. All right. Well, you don't really need to. So I'm going to describe it as much as I can too for the people that can't see this. But it looks like a target. And there's a middle circle here, and then there's bigger concentric circles going outward. So the middle circle is your comfort zone. When you're inside that comfort zone, change never happens, period, full stop. You're going to stay the same if you stay inside that comfort zone. So however you are in all aspects, that's who you're going to be in 50 years if you stay there. So we're talking about change, brain change, physical change, change in your personality, how far you can get in your job, all sorts of things. So everything applies in this chart. But I designed it for physical change. So here you are in your comfort zone and you stay comfortable. You cannot get fitness results inside this comfort zone. But you go outside this comfort zone to the first circle, and now you're working harder than you are in your comfort zone. Inside the comfort zone, you can get up to 60% perceived exertion and still not change. Here's the first circle out here. This is 70% perceived exertion. And this is very subjective to the person. So if you're already super sedentary, 70% exertion is different than it would be for you, Casey. 70% exertion for you would be 100% exertion for somebody who's been sedentary all their life, but it's all relative to the person. Okay, that's why it's called perceived exertion, because it's subjective to that person. So here we are for 70% perceived exertion. Now we're getting results. We're getting some results but with fast adaptation. So if we don't change the program up, we're just going to adapt and we're going to plateau. The perfect example is the first level outside this comfort zone here, where you got your typical gym elliptical person. So you go to 24-hour fitness, you see 150 people on the ellipticals, they're watching the TV up on the wall, or they're reading a book on the elliptical. That's your typical gym elliptical person, 70% perceived exertion. They're going to get results initially, and then they're not. Then they're going to level off because they're going to adapt. Then you go a little bit more intense than that, and you got brisk walking. Then a little bit more intense, now you're doing Zumba. A little bit more intense, now you're jogging. But you're still in this circle where you're getting some results, but with fast adaptation. Now you go out to the next circle, 80% perceived exertion. Now you're getting significant results with medium adaptation. So you're not going to adapt as easily, but you still will. And there's significant results. So now this is like running or high intensity training or high intensity interval training. Now 80% out here. Then you go out to 90%, the next circle out, 90% perceived exertion. This is a competitive athlete. So it's somebody who's making the podium at 5Ks, but it's recreational athletics. Now you're going to get rapid results with this intensity, but slow adaptation. So it's going to be harder for you to adapt. You still can, and you're going to get great results because the intensity that you're putting in. Because look how far we've come away from our comfort zone. So now we're getting a lot better results. Then you go outside all the circles into 100% perceived exertion. Now you're Olympic athlete intensity. It just doesn't mean you have to be an Olympic athlete, but you're training like an Olympic athlete. And now you're in the unicorn zone, is what I call this. Now you're getting amazing results with very little adaptation. And then you push it out to the edge and to insane results with rare adaptation. only if the routine never changes, because you're working so hard. It's really hard it's equally hard for the body to adapt. And so this is where the magic really happens for rapid results with little adaptation, super, super high intensity. Now, nobody ever does or can do their whole workout like this, but they're willing to go there. So that's the key. It doesn't mean you have to stay in these circles. It just means you have to know how to get there, which is a skill that's built with time over practice, and you're willing to go there. And then you can peak out and have a potential effect of those results, of that level of results, when you're willing to go there, and you can go there. Now down here is the red arrow, where this is how XGym helps people do this. So it's the time under tension that we have. We're never resting, even between reps. There's no momentum, so we can't cheat. So it's constant time under tension. So we start down here. It actually starts pretty easy. The exercises start pretty easy, but then we get to a burn. And then we keep going until we get to complete muscle fatigue. And that's the third. So that when it starts to burn, that's the second concentric circle outside of the comfort zone. Then the third circle, which is the 90% perceived exertion, is the complete muscle fatigue. And then we take them past there with our splinter techniques to get to 100% perceived exertion for beyond muscle fatigue. And another way to explain this is you get outside your comfort zone into this first level, and that's great. Now you start being uncomfortable, but it's not so bad. Then you go out to the next circle where it's burning, and now you get to the level of concentric failure. This is the lifting phase of the exercise. So a bicep curl, you're lifting the bicep up against gravity. Your muscle is shortening as you're contracting, and you fail. You get to a certain point in your range where you can't go any higher because you've gotten concentric failure. But when you get to that point, you can hold it there. You're still strong enough isometrically to hold it there. And so we can start some splinter techniques to get you to the next level outside in the unicorn zone, where you are experiencing eccentric failure because you're stronger eccentrically than you are isometrically. You're stronger isometrically than you are concentrically. But in that last phase, eccentric failure, where there's nothing left and you can't even fight the weight, gravity just pulls it down no matter how hard you're trying. That's the unicorn zone. So that's where we want to get people for those unicorn results, and we do it with our methodology to get them there.
I love the visuality of this. So thank you so very much for sharing this. Like I said, we'll link this in the show notes so people can go back and see the document and also watch the video to see those things. And that's very, very well explained. And I like that there is that bit of progression and a journey and helping people understand that you don't need to get to the unicorn zone today on your first workout. You'll get used to some of these things, but this is the journey to get there. It's very easy to understand and very well explained. So I really like all the work that you put into that, and that looks really good. The last thing I guess I wanted to ask you was something related to what you said earlier about your mother. Almost to the dates. It's kind of weird as far as the years go. My mom went through breast cancer. So she was diagnosed somewhere around 1998. She passed away in 2006. There's certainly things, obviously, that we know now that I didn't know then and wasn't able to do much. And you are doing the same thing. You wrote about that eventually and talked about the 5 things that you would recommend to help with dementia. In particular, as like an umbrella term for any of those mental disorders. Off the top of your head, what 1 or 2 things do you wish you would have known, especially back in 1998, but even in 2004, 2005, in the later stages? What things do you wish you would have known then that you think could have been powerful impacts on your mom?
Gosh, I would have worked with her more closely on getting her to buy into what she needs to do for it. It's fascinating. Alzheimer's is different than other forms of dementia in lots of ways, but one of the main ways is when people have Alzheimer's, whether it's early onset or regular Alzheimer's, they don't even want to hear the word. They get mad when you bring it up. and they are less likely to cooperate with lifestyle changes than with other forms of dementia. If you have an age-related dementia, then those people will joke about having Alzheimer's. But a person with Alzheimer's will never joke about it. They're offended by the word, which is fascinating to see. And a normal person with normal dementia is going to be much more compliant with the things that you're asking them to do. What I wish I would have done is just been more helpful in, see, I really didn't know these things, but knowing what I do now, if I could go back in time, then I would just sit down with my dad. I would say, here's what's going to happen. Here's what we need to do. Mom, we're going to do all the shopping for her. We're going to make her life super easy. We're going to get her more around her friends. We're going to work on our relationship with her more intensively. We're going to do all the cooking and shopping for her so she eats what we make her. And we're going to make exercise really fun. And we're going to pick a brain training technique every 3 months, and it's going to be new, where she learns something completely new that she sucks at. So maybe it's going to be a new language, maybe it's going to be algebra, and we're going to make it super fun, and we're going to do it with her. And so, because those people, you can't just tell them to do something. Some people that have normal age-related dementia will, and you can, but not Alzheimer's. They're going to fight you unless you do it with them and make it fun. So it takes a lot more work for the caregiver, but if it's somebody that you care about, you're getting quality time. And so if and they're at the age where that's a really good idea because they're going to be older and you want to spend more time with them anyways to help them in their golden years. So that's what I would have done differently.
Very
Had
thoughtful
I known.
answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, very thoughtful answer. Hard to reflect back on the opportunities lost, but again, we all did the best we could.
Yep.
You know, at the time, my family switched over to a very low fat, high carbohydrate, high sugar kind of a diet because we thought
Yep.
that was the best thing. And in hindsight, that was probably the worst thing. And yeah, it's cool to see the rise of metabolic psychiatry. And you know, I've spoken personally with people who went into assisted living facilities testing with moderate you know, Alzheimer's, implementing some of those things, whether it be diet, the movement, red light therapy, so many different things that we know about now, and end up walking out of these places and they're completely fine. To see it with your own eyes is absolutely amazing. And knowing that, yeah, in some cases we can definitely reverse this and reinstall an amazing quality of life. So pretty cool to see. And yeah, just another interesting conversation with you, PJ, like another hour that is completely flown by. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate how easy to understand and implement you make these things. People hopefully are not like intimidated by this stuff, but understand that, like we said, like this is a process. If you learn this stuff and if you do the work and you put in the reps, this will feel easy. This will become automatic to you, and it will make everything else easier and really improve your life versus thinking it's going to be, this is one more thing that I have to do. No, this is something that's making your life better. So really enjoy chatting with you. This is really, really fun, PJ. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you in your work?
Yeah, everything is on xgym.com. Just go there, xgym.com. Super easy.
Awesome. We'll link to that. We'll link to some of the other materials that you mentioned, so people can go directly to that as well. But yeah, we'll send people there. And like I said, PJ, just a very enjoyable conversation. I really appreciate how much thought and work you put into this. The report was absolutely phenomenally done. So kudos on that. And hopefully we get to catch up again in the future sometime. But for now, thank you so very much for spending a little bit more time with us around here. It was very, very fun and very educational. So thank you so very much.
Yeah, thank you so very much.
Absolutely. It was an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.